Okay, so we're recording. This is July 17th, intervals and scales. So, what we were just talking about was, um, you know, what were your reactions to the material? And did anybody have any specific questions before we kind of dive in? No.
No.
Okay, good. um, if we can, I'm going to put up the whiteboard and do a very quick kind of recap, just to kind of give this to you in another format. So if it clicks differently, then you have it that way. And then I think what would be most helpful would be if I played a few intervals on the piano and we did a little bit of ear training. Ear training on Zoom, it's interesting. We don't have a lot of time in this class for like full on melodic dictation or anything like that. It does work um, with Zoom, and there's not a lot of pitch variation, which is really nice. There's just a delay. So you might hear me say something, and then you might see me push the piano, and then you'll hear me, actually play. So that's the difference. I think somebody just tried to call, but it wasn't anyone important. Okay. Okay. So let me do a quick screen share here. Um, I just wanted to make sure that we were clear. I mean, obviously, you guys have seen all the videos and read the material and everything. So, what I wanted to do is just make sure this concept was clear, where we were talking about. Oh, gotta move this. There we go. We were talking about building scales and then relating that to intervals. First of all, when we're doing any kind of interval identification, okay, harmonic or melodic or um, written or oral, when we're doing any kind of interval identification, we are going to be doing what's called simple intervals, okay, not the compound intervals. So simple intervals are the ones that are within an octave. So basically everything beyond an octave, like let's just say I had the interval of a tenth, okay, the interval of a tenth is fine. The thing is that when we get beyond a tenth, especially that size, it's really hard to visualize, and it's kind of one of these things that our brain, even when we hear an interval that's that wide, our brain sort of reduces it automatically and says, oh, that's a third, right? So we might say a tenth, for the sake of what we're writing, but when it gets beyond that, we're basically just going to be talking about anything between a unison and an octave. We kind of reduce everything to within the octave. Okay, so that's sort of blanket statement. um, let's construct a quick major scale. Someone pick a key, any key. Not
Yeah.
F. Okay, let's go with F. All right, the first thing to do is draw your footballs, right? That's sort of a given. I think most of us probably get that pretty easily, right? Okay, the reason why we do it this way is because in any scale, in any type of writing, diatonic writing, we're not permitted to have more than one letter name per note or per pitch. Okay, so unless we're doing something that is chromatic or octatonic or whatever, right? Those are a little bit different. But in terms of major and minor, you got to have every letter represented. Okay, so this doesn't get too hairy in simple keys like F major. But if you got up to like F sharp minor, the leading tone for F sharp minor is E sharp, right? It's not actually F natural. So it's important when you get to those types of keys to remember, okay, we need to actually have an E in this scale versus two Fs, right? For example. So this is why it's kind of nice to just kind of lay it out, right? You have your octave F to F. We're going to create a major scale, and you all probably remember from the unit that it's whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, right? So, and instrumentalists find this very easy. Like we just remember, oh, F major is, you got the one flat. But if we wanted to go through it and make sure, right, that we were doing it correctly, whole step between F and G, good. We've got a whole step between G and A, good. We need a half step between A and B, right? So we alter the B. And it, you might be thinking, well, why didn't we just make this an A sharp? That's because then we start altering the interval that we just counted prior to the A, right? So you always alter the note you're going to. Okay, so we got the B flat. B flat to C, whole step already, we're good. C to D, whole step, D to E, whole step, and E to F is already a half step, okay? So again, if you're an instrumentalist, you might be thinking about this like in terms of your fingerings, right? Going up the scale or whatever. If you're relating it to the keyboard, which is some of what the exercises were this week, it might be helpful to just draw yourself real fast, like, all right, this is my piano, right? And what did I give myself? An octave and a half or something, right? And remember, when you have two keys back to back, no matter what the color is, right? So E to F here is a half step, right? B to C here is a half step. Okay. And again, you might be thinking of this already on your instrument, but just in terms of, do I have another accidental on there or not? That's why we don't, is because E to F is already the half step. Okay. So we've got F major. What I wanted to make sure that was clear this week was measuring intervals with the scale. Okay. And this is why sometimes if you look at other, theory textbooks, sometimes they do intervals first and then scales. Sometimes they do scales first and then intervals. Okay. But this is why they kind of go together. So we are counting up the scale in our interval sizes. So F to G is a major second, right? F to A, anybody know what that interval is?
Major third.
Major third. F to B flat is perfect fourth. And then F to C, perfect fifth. And remember, the fourths and the fifths in major and minor scales are always going to be perfect, right? We don't alter those, right? And then F, I'm running out of room. F up to, we'll do this, up to D, major sixth.
Major sixth.
Yeah. And then F up to E, major seventh.
Major seventh.
And then you've got your octave, right? Perfect octave. All right. So in a major scale, all of your ascending intervals are going to be major. Yeah. Now, the way that that I think is the most consistently accurate way of counting minor intervals are descending in the major scale. Okay. So and we can do a minor scale in a minute, and I'll show you why that it changes with the minor. But going down, we've got a minor second, minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, same as we had before. Okay, remember those intervals are always perfect. Minor sixth, minor seventh. This is going to look messy. Sorry about that. And then, of course, perfect octave. However, yeah, we'll just put P8 down here. I don't want to draw another line through it. So in terms of interval identification on paper, anyway, that's a pretty kind of quick and dirty way of figuring out what your interval is. If you're ascending in a major scale, it's part of the major scale, so it's going to be a major interval. If you're descending, it's going to be a minor interval. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, can't I just take the minor scale and ascend through a minor scale? Okay, let's do a little practice with this. So this is F major. What's the relative minor of F?
It's is it D?
D. Good. So how did you come to that?
I just know the key signatures of the minor scales.
That's one way to do it, right? So if you're going to find the minor, okay, and this is related to scales, but it was a very minor part of that unit. So this is important too. When you have a major scale, okay, if you're singing in solfege, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? What we're interested in when it comes to relative minors, because they're related by key area, is this note, la-based minor, okay? And the reason why this is important is because if you're modulating in a piece, you've like flutists all know the Bach partita, right? Or if you've got some other piece, I mean, lots of music does this, right? You're shifting key areas very frequently. So what is easy to do for composers is to shift to the relative minor, and then the relative minor shares the same key signature as the relative major. All you need to do is add a new leading tone. That's not all you need to do, but it's a simpler way of modulating rather than trying to find a completely different key. And there are ways to get around this as well, with other keys. But but we're interested in la-based minor because they share, key material. All right, so let's go ahead and do our D minor for a minute here. Okay, so the easiest way to think about minors, you could build them just like we built major scales, right? You could just build half steps and whole steps all the way up. If you know your major scales, okay, and you know that your relative minor shares that key signature, all you need to do is transfer your key signature. Done, okay? This is the natural minor, right? Now, if we want to make this what we call a functional minor, okay, we need to have a major dominant. Whoa. Okay. Now, we haven't started building triads yet, but basically that means that the triad that falls on the fifth scale degree here is going to be major. In simpler terms, though, a functional dominant basically comes from adding the leading tone, okay? In other words, you're not going to know necessarily that we're in F major or D minor without indicating that we are going to D, okay? And you can do that with repeating D a whole lot. Okay, that's one way to do it, and that's how chant works. But the best way to do it in functional harmony is to do this, to raise your leading tone. Okay, so we're taking the seventh scale degree and we're just raising it up a half step, so that when we're playing this scale, our ear is going to say, there's the tonic, right? We've got this strong pull from the leading tone to the tonic then. Okay. By the way, if this is a whole step, like it is in our natural minor, in our Aeolian mode, if this is a whole step, we don't call it a leading tone, we call it a subdominant, right? So they actually do have two different functions. So, okay, now we've got our half step here, right? The problem with this scale, I should say that this is the harmonic minor. And we call it harmonic because of the harmony. We've created this harmony out of that leading tone, okay? And it'll become a little more clear probably even next week after we start triads. But for now, just knowing that we raise the leading tone is the important part. So now the problem here, if we look at just our intervals, okay, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step. Oh, sorry, half step. Pretty common stuff. What is the interval between B flat and C sharp?
That's an augmented second.
It is an augmented second, exactly. So B flat to C sharp, remember there's two parts to every interval. So the raw interval is just a second, right? We've got B to C. Those are a space and a line next to each other, two letter names, however you want to count it, right? It's just the raw interval of a second. Then we need to figure out the quality. A whole step would be a major second, like we saw up here, right, in our major scale, do to re. But this is wider. So when we go wider than major, we end up with augmented. Okay, so this is an augmented second. It's a little bit of a weird interval because it is not found in a diatonic scale, right? It sounds exotic. I can't remember who it was, but years ago I had a student that said, that's the Aladdin scale, because it sounds like it should be from, Arabian Nights or something. And it's true. That sounds very like a big wide interval. So what we do to remedy this, because you wouldn't necessarily see this in Handel very frequently, or earlier Baroque, like we don't get this in haute terre. You know what I mean? When harmony was just kind of coming together and being developed in this way, this was an odd interval. And even so, if any of you ever take AP Music Theory, augmented seconds are a deduction on any of your free response questions because you're not supposed to write with them. They're not part of common practice period. So just like any other augmented interval, actually. So what we do to remedy this is then we raise this note, raise the sixth. Oops. So we're going to make that natural. Okay. So with natural minor, we're not changing anything from the relative major. With harmonic minor, we're actually just changing the leading tones. We're raising the seventh scale degree. And now this scale here is called the melodic minor. Okay, where we're raising the sixth and the seventh. However, the reason why it's called melodic minor is that we're going to change our melody ascending and descending. So we've made these changes going up because we're going to that upper tonic. When we come back down, we're going to change them back to our natural minor notes. Okay, so that's where the melodic part of that comes from. We're changing what we're doing in different directions. Okay. Now, we're not as concerned about our functional dominant when we're coming back down the scale. It's really leading up to that top, leading tone. And of course, when you're talking chords, you're not necessarily talking ascending or descending. You're just talking a major or minor. So you're going to have leading tones, in real pieces. You're going to have them all over the place. But when you have a very clear line up and down, often we utilize the melodic minor. Okay. So now getting back to our interval questions, let's see. We have limited colors to deal with. I'm just going to keep going with blue. Let's just analyze some of these intervals. So ascending, we have another major second. And then ascending here, we've got a minor third. Still have our perfect fourth and perfect fifth because we don't alter those, right? And then we have this sort of accidental soup, you know what I mean? Where we're trying to figure out, okay, do we have a major sixth or a minor sixth, or what form are we in? And it does depend on the form. So if you're just in natural minor, you're going to have a minor sixth and a minor seventh, right? If you're in harmonic minor, you're going to have a minor sixth and a major seventh. If you're in melodic minor, you're going to have a major sixth and a major seventh. See, so the minor scales start to get a little bit trickier. So when you're identifying intervals, if you want, again, kind of the quick version of intervals, think about your major scale. Major scales don't change, right? So once you've constructed your major scale, you can pretty much figure out all the major and minor intervals. It's a lot quicker and a lot more reliable than trying to count half steps. You can count half steps, a half step is a minor second, and 2 half steps is a major second, and then 3 half steps is a minor third, and then 4 half steps is a major third. And you can keep going that way. But if you're just identifying them like we had to in some of these worksheets, you're probably gonna find that this is a lot faster and easier to do. So, did anybody have questions about this before we look at the worksheets? Can't see everyone. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. Yay. Looks like we're all right. Okay, so let me see if I can share. Whiteboard. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to share my Google Chrome. Ignore the 50 million tabs I have open because I have 50 million of them open. Let's see which one of these we want to start with. Should we start with building intervals or building scales? Anybody have a preference? Okay, let's do intervals. And I'll play some of these as well so we can get a little bit of ear training in. So they're drawing above a given note. Okay, so this is maybe a little tiny bit more complicated than just identifying them like we were in the scale, but hopefully the other practice kind of led up to this. So a major third above E Anybody
G
know?
sharp.
G sharp, yeah, because you're thinking your E major scale or arpeggio. You can go up to G sharp. Get my, oh, yeah, this is my huge pencil for some reason. All right, but that's a G sharp. Perfect fifth above A.
E natural.
E natural. Good. Minor second above C.
D flat.
Yeah, good. Okay, so E flat, and this is hard to write in here. And the reason why it's not C sharp is because the raw interval of a second means you have to have two separate notes, a line and a space, or two letter names, however you want to think of it. Major seventh above B.
A sharp.
A sharp. Yeah. Now here's another trick, and this is again something that is in the module, but because it's boot camp, we're just flying through interval inversions, right? Anytime you've got a larger interval, remember the rule of 9 that was in the unit. When you have, say, a third that's inverted, it becomes a sixth, right? When you have a seventh that's inverted, it becomes a second. When you have a fourth that's inverted, it becomes a fifth. And when you have an octave inverted, it becomes a unison, right? So these all add to 9, okay? And if you have a large interval like this, and you're like, oh, I don't know my B major scale, you know, or it's going to take me forever to figure out my B major scale. A major seventh inverted is what interval?
Minor second.
Minor second, exactly. Right? So it's 9 minus 7 is 2. The major becomes minor. We just flip-flop the quality. Right? So a minor second, if we look at a minor second below B, that's really easy. Right? It's just a half step down, so we can think, oh, we just go down to A sharp. As long as we're writing it in the correct spot, right, that the assignment's asked for, then it's the same note. So this is one advantage to just having everything reduced to within an octave. We don't have to worry about all those compound intervals. We can actually invert them and consider them that way. So perfect octave is pretty easy. That's just D, right? How about the perfect fourth above G?
C.
Good. And minor sixth above E.
C.
Good. Yeah. And again, if the sixth is a little bit fuzzy, it might be helpful to invert the interval. That would be a major third, right? And you know that C major would basically be covering E natural, so you've got C and then you invert it. So just for practice, I think I can, let me see if I can attach, well, I'll keep that attached for now. I'm moving you. Over to the piano here. Move my flute tops. Okay, so is the major third, right? If you're singing it with solfege, it's do re. Another thing that you might have noticed on some of these activities is that the intervals, especially on Theoria, you've got the option of doing harmonic or melodic intervals. Harmonic intervals are where it's played at the same time. And in that case, it's a little harder sometimes to kind of get your brain around what is this interval. So it might be useful to hum and sing it and separate out the intervals that way. Now, in a classroom, you might not be able to do that, but since we're all at home, I think it's definitely worth exploring. The more that you can integrate these pitches, the easier it becomes for you, and then you start to be able to just identify them, you know, kind of right away. So that's our major third here. Perfect fifth. And you might have also seen what I put up in the announcements about the kind of what do I want to call them? I don't want to call them pneumatic devices because they're really not, but tunes that will help you remember certain intervals, right? So major third, I already said, is do to mi, right? I always think the Star Wars. Right. That's my perfect fifth. If you're a string player, you might just be like, drawn to this because that's how violin, violoncello are all tuned is with perfect fifths. So there's different ways to get to it, but yeah, that's your perfect fifth. Your minor second, very crunchy. I think this also sounds like Jaws. Okay. Major seven. Oh, sorry, I didn't play that right. It really wants to resolve up. That's usually what I'm feeling when I hear major seven. Octaves are pretty easy. If you're thinking of tunes that will help with this, Somewhere Over the Rainbow is a perfect octave at the beginning. And then let's see, we've got perfect fourth. Now this sounds a little funkier, I think, than a perfect fifth. It's a little further up our harmonic sequence, a little further away from our fundamental when you're thinking harmonic series. A good tune for this is Here Comes the Bride. If you're looking for your tunes, that's a good one. Minor sixth. You know what's interesting? The major sixth is actually the theme for like NBC. It's just an inverted triad. And what was it that somebody told me once? If you think of a C major triad, C, E, G, G, E, C is actually the letters that stand for General Electric Corporation, who owns NBC. So that's I think how they came up with that little tune. But yes, it is a major sixth for that theme. And then if you hear it in minor, it's just a minor sixth, right? So right, minor sixth. The other pretty much covered the big intervals. Oops, here, let me undo my notation. There we go. And let me clear this. There. All right. Oh, and then we had a couple in bass clef. And this particular exercise didn't ask for intervals below a given note, but that's also something that you might be asked for. So just for practice, can we do a couple below a note? Let's just look at the last line. How about what's a minor second below F down here in the bass clef?
E.
E.
E natural. Yeah. How about a major third below E flat in the bass clef?
E.
Tricky.
C flat.
Yeah, we have to date
Alright.
E flat. Yeah, exactly, because it has to be a third first. Yep. Has to be raw interval there. How about a minor seventh below C?
Minor seventh.
E.
is going to be a D for sure. What accidentals do we need here?
Flat. Sharp. Natural.
So, yeah, this is tricky. So, and in fact, it's kind of a trick question because we don't need it. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be D, a major second above C is D?
Exactly. Yeah. So then you just transfer that down below. Yep. Exactly. All right. Get that out of there. I don't know how that got there. Okay. And then let's do perfect fifth below B flat.
E flat.
E flat. Good. I'm drawing with my mouse pad, so it's taking forever. There we go. All right. Perfect fourth below D.
A.
A.
A. Good. Yep. And then a minor third below F sharp.
D sharp.
D sharp. Excellent. Yep. There you go. That's that. All right. So we have it. Why don't I also do, while we're at the piano, why don't I also do a couple of interval identification exercises by ear? So this isn't going to relate to what you see on the page necessarily, but let's see. Could you name this interval?
Oh, together. Hmm.
Perfect fourth.
Perfect fourth. Good. Great. Good. How about
Perfect fourth.
this is the one that if you hear the note in the middle, kind of clues you in.
Oh, minor sixth.
Six. Exactly. Yep. Good. Good. How about
Minor second.
Your second.
very tricky. How about
Major second. No.
major second? Yeah.
Oh.
Do re. There's one we haven't talked about yet, and it's this interval. Anybody know? It's actually something called a tritone. Okay. And it is 6 half steps if you're counting. It is either an augmented second or a diminished fifth. And this is really the only augmented or diminished interval that we care to be able to identify by ear. I mean, the augmented second is useful in a scale just so that you know that you're in a harmonic minor scale. But this one shows up diatonically. You'll see next week when we talk about triads. It actually shows up in 7th chords. It shows up in our leading tone chord, and it shows up in our dominant 7th. So anyway, this is an interval that in the early days of chant and even early days of tonal harmony was banned. And it's because it was thought to be the devil's interval, 6 half steps. There are some modes that prominently highlight the the tritone, like Locrian mode, you would never hear Locrian mode in church. Right? Because it's just a little bit too much. So this interval, I think that the website that I gave you, or the tunes to identify aurally, intervals aurally, said that this was Maria from West Side Story. Right? So it resolves up to that perfect fifth. If you're Simpsons fans, this is the beginning of the Simpsons theme. I know that is like almost dating myself with this, but because I don't know that anybody watches The Simpsons anymore. But if you're on Disney Plus and you've seen The Simpsons, right, that's the beginning of the theme there. But anyway, yeah. So it is an interval. It's the only augmented or diminished interval that we're really, kind of keyed into in terms of identification orally. Okay, so so that we have time, let's move on to some scale stuff. And we did do some already. Oops, let me erase this. I'm gonna carry all my notations with me here. All right. Let's see. So we had 2 scale exercises, one for major scales and one for minor scales. So what would be more useful right now? Should we do the major scales or the minor scales, or talk through a few of each?
Well, the minor scales were more complicated for me.
Okay, so let's do the minor scales, and while I'm at the piano, I'll do some playing so that you get to hear some of these changes in the melodic and the harmonic intervals and stuff. So B harmonic minor is what they're asking for here, and do not use a key signature, right? Key signatures are cheating in this particular exercise. But I would like to just draw a circle of fifths at the end so that we kind of get a sense of what we're doing with our keys. So B harmonic minor, what are the names of the notes going up?
B, C sharp.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see what I wrote here. D, E,
Uh-huh.
F sharp,
Good. G. So what are we altering with harmonic minor then?
It'll be A sharp.
A sharp. Good. So I can attempt to draw it here, except I think my writing implement is going to be enormous for some reason. But if we start with B, oops, is that even a stick? Yeah, B, C, D, and you're right, this is C sharp. The sharp should really go on the line, but oops, E. That should be an E. Yeah, this is gonna be too big. Anyway, F, F sharp, G, A sharp, and B. Okay, so that looks totally messy. I probably won't write the rest of the scales because it's too small for my writing tool. But as I'm playing them, you could hear this, right? Is your Aladdin scale, like from Arabian Nights, right? So that's your augmented interval. Let's do one that is melodic minor. How about, well, actually, I'll tell you what. Let's go through, no, they're numbered down, aren't they? I wanted to do G sharp NAFA minor because I think that's important to look at. And then let's do F sharp melodic ascending, okay, is what the MA stands for. So, all right, so F sharp in the bass clef. what is F sharp melodic ascending going to look like? And the way I would do this, because it does get a little convoluted trying to build the major or trying to build the minor scales with half steps and whole steps if you're altering a lot of stuff. Think about what is your relative major key signature. So if F sharp is La, and you have to get to your major tonic, you have to go up 3 half steps. So F sharp going up 3 half steps is what note?
A.
A.
So the key signature for A major is
3 sharps.
3 sharps. So you're going F sharp to F sharp with 3 sharps, and the 3 sharps are F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, right? So you've got that already built in. What are we going to alter then for melodic ascending?
Raising the 6th and the 7th.
Right. So what would be the 6th?
The B. No, I mean, sorry, the D.
D, right? Because bass clef. Yeah, D, and then
The E.
E sharp. Yeah, exactly. So if you're thinking F sharp melodic minor, the top of that scale actually sounds like the major, right? But going down, right, and then we're altering it back, coming back down. I would like to also just touch on the solfege for this, but my writing tool is going to look ridiculous. So let's do this. Can we also write out or talk about number 11 there, that G sharp natural minor? And then I'll go back to the whiteboard and we can write these out so that I can show you what the solfege is for them. So G sharp natural minor. We have to figure out what the key signature, how many sharps would be in that based on our relative major key signature. So if you take G sharp, you go up 3 half steps, or up
B.
a minor. You're looking at B, right? B major. How many sharps is B major?
5.
5. Yeah. So F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, right? And the order of sharps never changes. The order of flats never changes either, right? So we're looking at G sharp, bass clef. And so you could hear, hopefully, in natural minor, because we don't have any altered leading tone leading us up to that tonic, we expect the tonic will be what it is just because of where we started. But if you were in the middle of a piece, there'd be almost no way to know, unless you just heard G sharp over and over and over and over, what your tonic actually was. It's really, really helpful to have that lead. So let me take you back over for a minute and set up the whiteboard here at the desk so that I can just show you the solfege. Now, depending on those of you who are graduating seniors, who are going to be taking theory exams and the like in the fall, depending on your school, you're probably going to have different. Does everybody have this written down? Can I erase it? Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna clear now. Yeah, depending on your school, you're gonna have different solfege requirements and expectations. Some schools use what's called, in fact, I think most schools use what's called movable do. And in terms of minor, movable do gets a lot of alterations to it. Now, it's possible that you'll use movable do, but something called law-based minor, like I'd mentioned earlier. And law-based minor is where you're going to end up singing la as your tonic, because that's where you're starting, you know, with your relative minor versus do. So as a sort of catch-all, I think probably the best preparation is going to be to know movable do and at least be familiar with it. And then obviously whatever school you end up going to is going to, you know, kind of get you trained in their method. In Akron, we use movable do. In I think just about every school I attended, we used movable do. So anyway, so it's very likely that movable do is going to be what you end up with. So let's just go back to what we had here in practice our bass clef a little bit. We said we were doing F sharp melodic minor, right? So, and we'll just do the ascending and descending versions since we can. And that's going to be important for the altered pitches. So F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, and then we said we have D sharp and E sharp ascending, right? Descending is F sharp, oops, E natural, D natural, A, G sharp. I switched keys, or I switched. There we go. Switched clefs there. Hold on a second. Let me put that back. There we go. D, C sharp, sorry. B, A, G sharp, F sharp. All right. So there's our F sharp melodic minor, right? If I were singing this on solfege, right, do doesn't typically change. We still have re is our whole step. Usually, you know, if you're thinking of like your major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and I'll write that down here. Okay. If you're thinking do, re, mi is what should come next, you're right. But in minor, because we've got this lowered third, you know, as compared to the major, we're going to lower this interval here with a syllable that reflects that. So that's may. So it's going to be do, re, may. Fa and sol don't get changed. That's the fourth and fifth. And then here at the end, we said this sounds just like a major scale. So this is la, ti, do. Okay. And again, do doesn't change coming down, but we're taking those notes that feel like major at the top and we're reverting them back on a half step with the 6th and 7th scale degree. So T becomes te, la becomes lay. So do, te, lay, sol, fa, because those are not altered, and then may, re, do. So this is, you know, again, a concept that we don't have a ton of time to dive into. This is just, hey, make sure you know that this exists. That because we've got all these alterations in melodic minor, that we have pitches, or solfege that matches the altered pitches. We could actually sing a whole chromatic scale on solfege if we really wanted to. Anytime you raise a syllable, it usually becomes an E sound. And anytime you lower a syllable, it usually becomes an ah or an A sound. So if you're going up, do, di, re, re, right? So re and may are actually harmonically, or enharmonic, right? They actually sound the same, but based on what your note is, you could be singing re instead of may. Do, di, re, 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 mi, fa, because that's a half step. D, sol, si, la, li, ti, do is a half step. Do, ti, te, la, le, sol, se. Fa, mi is a half step. Me, re, ra, do. Okay. So the ra is a little bit unique. You're only going to see that in Phrygian mode, where you have a half step at the beginning of the scale. Otherwise, that syllable really doesn't get used, unless you're in like a chromatic situation like this. But anyway, yeah, so that's sort of our 30-second introduction to chromatic solfege. And again, if this looks like total Greek to you, don't worry about it. You know, it's just it's a process. If you want to kind of try to internalize some of these intervals that we were talking about, you know, relating them to their major or minor scale or interval would be helpful to use the correct solfege. The last thing that I wanted to make sure we just talked about a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and clear this out again, is the circle of fifths, because that relates to scales. So circle of fifths looks just like a clock, right? We've got 12 key areas and 12 scales. And we start with C major at the top. Now, those of you who are instrumentalists, especially my students, have seen me draw a circle of fifths all the time. So this might be kind of complete review, but it's good to, you know, to make sure that we are familiarizing ourselves with where these concepts come from, especially in terms of, you know, when we're building scales, how our order of sharps and flats come into play, right? So with C major, we don't have any sharps or flats. Remember I said there was an order of sharps and an order of flats that doesn't change. Anybody know what those are? Like if you went through the keys, what would be the order of flats that you'd get? Or what's the order of sharps that you'd see?
The flats are B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat, F flat.
Yes. All the band people know this, right? B, E, A, D, G, C, F. Okay. And that basically covers, you know, every potential permutation of a major scale, right? And F, C, G, D, A, E, B are the order of sharps. And what do you guys notice about these orders? How do they relate to each other?
They're the inverses of each other.
They are. Yeah, they're like mirror images, basically, right? So the order of flats is the exact opposite of the order of sharps. Okay. So the way, again, this is kind of shorthand, but the way to figure out where the keys go on the circle. Let's go with sharps first. Okay. We want to get the key area directly to the right of C. We want to get the key area that has one sharp in it, right? Because they go around 1 sharp, 2 sharps, 3 sharps, 4 sharps, 5 sharps, right? And they accumulate going that direction. So here, if we want the key that has 1 sharp, we look over in our order and we go, all right, F sharp is the 1 sharp. The way this works is for sharps, the last sharp listed in the key signature is the leading tone for the key. Okay, so think about your scale that has F sharp as a leading tone. What key area is that? What scale is that?
G.
G, right? You just go up a half step, boom, G. Okay, F and C would be 2 sharps. So if C is the last one listed, C sharp is the leading tone. What's the key for that has C sharp as the leading tone?
D.
D, right? How about G sharp is the leading tone?
A.
A. How about D sharp is the leading tone?
E.
E. A is the leading. A sharp is the leading tone.
E.
B. E sharp is the leading tone.
F.
F sharp.
Sharp.
Right. Yeah, because if it's E sharp, it's enharmonic with F,
Right.
which then you go up a half step, right, and it ends up being F sharp.
Right.
Good. And then B sharp as the leading tone.
C sharp.
C sharp.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Okay. Now, going around the circle the other direction with the flats. The way this works is that the last flat listed, or sorry, the second to last flat listed is the name of the key. Okay. Now, this is a little bit weird starting with because we've said this earlier. F major is the key that has one flat, right? So if we have one flat, we don't have a second to last flat, but we're looking there at the end of the order for our name of our key. So it might be easiest to just memorize, okay, F has one flat. That might be the easiest
Right.
thing to do. If you have B flat major, or sorry, I gave you the name, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
Two note. Yikes. Okay, two flats. Second to last flat listed would be B flat major.
B flat.
Yes. Okay. Three flats listed. Second to last flat,
E flat.
E flat, right? So you guys see how this works. Four flats, second to last is A. All right. And now coming around the bottom, we're like, oh, we're out of space, right? Coming around the bottom of the circle, these three key areas on the bottom are enharmonic. So we've got D flat, which is the same as C sharp, F sharp, which is the same as G flat, and B, which is the same as C flat. So when you're practicing your scales, I mean, unless your teacher tells you you have to do it a particular way, you could think of these last three on the bottom any way you wanted. You could think of them like flats. You could think of them like sharps. I personally, when I'm practicing my scales, I think D flat. I don't think C sharp. That's too many sharps for me, right? I think F sharp for some reason. I don't know why, because it's six sharps or six flats either way on that one. And I think B instead of C flat. So now this is the circle of fifths for major. We also have this for minor, okay? And because we're running a little low on time, I'm gonna kind of write these in, but stick with me here. So, and we'll just do the sharps again. Relative of G is E, B, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp. And then going around the flats, D, G, C, F, and the same three around the bottom are enharmonic. So G sharp, or sorry, G flat, E flat, and A flat. Okay, so it's important, as far as the circle fifths goes, it's important to have this sort of way of constructing the circle, because in more advanced theory courses that we don't have time to cover this material right now, remember how I said it's important to know what your relative minor is because they share key areas? We start to see modulation to closely related keys. And basically the closely related keys are the ones that are right next to each other on the circle of fifths. So anyway, and they're relative minors. So it's an important kind of concept to just have, with you. But that's a little bit more down the road in other theory courses. Any questions? Stop sharing here so I can see everybody. Good. Okay. Well, next week we're gonna start really diving into stuff. If this wasn't enough, triads and seventh chords, which is going to be really fun, and that also includes an introduction to Roman numeral analysis and a little bit of figured bass. So, so this is it's going to be a crash course, but next week's going to be really, really fun because you start to actually like apply everything that we've learned already. So, and as usual, if you feel like you need a little bit more practice or want, some extra resources, I'm happy to send them along. Just send me an email. All right, cool.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody. If there's no questions, you may leave.
Bye.
Have a good week, and I'll see you next Friday.
Thank you, Lindsay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.